starting the webinar. So thank you, everyone. Here is the city of Milan. So I'm Elisa Porreca with Jaime Berti, the team that is working for CLEVERFOOD, but I will leave immediately the floor to Ania De Cunto from Eurocities to introduce the webinar.
Thank you very much, Elisa and Jaime. Hello, everyone. I'm joining here today from an hotel in Riga, getting ready to participate in another conference. But thank you very much for joining and for being interested in CLEVERFOOD. So I will literally spend just a few minutes to present CLEVERFOOD, why we think it was important to work on this project, and then we can present more in details the survey. As I said, my name is Ania De Cunto and I work at Eurocities. I also want to thank my colleague Chiara Ruticciani that we work together also on this project. Can we launch the PowerPoint? Just literally a few slides to get to know about CLEVERFOOD. Well, for those of you that work on food policy, you must know that there is quite a variety of projects, of initiatives, of entities, of networks that are currently working on food. And everything that they do is fantastic. But unfortunately, what happens that sometimes remains very much closed in the project itself, or when the project is finished, then sometimes the results are not widely available. So this is what CLEVERFOOD would like to try to solve or to give us support to. So it's really a coordination and support action for those of you more familiar with the terms. And the ambition is really to bring together all different initiatives, European projects, national projects, entities, everybody who has an interest in transforming food system. Next slide. So what CLEVERFOOD stands for is Connected Labs for Empowering Versatile Engagement in Radical Food System Transformation. These are the names that usually are given to a EU-funded project. But really the important is that our main aim is to try to bring together all these different realities to work together for radical food system transformation. Next slide. Well, also what we want to achieve is a food system that is fair, healthy, sustainable, circular, and more plant-based. And next. Yeah, so how do we want to do that? We are going to work around a number of key areas related to food system transformation. One is, for example, multi-stakeholder engagement. Another one will be food education. We'll work mass mobilization. We will also work very much on policy and governance, innovation, finance, so all areas of work that are currently now fundamental around changing food system. And we want to try to involve all the different actors for food system transformation. Of course, cities are a fundamental part. We do believe that are a fundamental part of, have a fundamental role to play to change food system. So with the kind of support that we will provide, the change very much depending on the type of actors. So we work, for example, with startups and SMEs. We'll work with finance foundation and solution provider. But more in specific, together with the city of Milan, Eurocities is involved on a particular working package that focuses on policy and governance. And here, just very much in practice, what we want to do. Next slide. Yes. Yeah, no, this I will not explain too much detail. The living labs and the policy labs. Just the next slide, sorry. Yes, so just very much in practice, what does it mean? So we said that we need a policy that is supportive of changes in food system, both at local, national, European, and international level. So what we want to do is to bring together innovative net lab. So as you know, as I'm sure many of you attending here today are working on innovative solution at local level related to food system. We call them innovation lab, policy lab. So the idea is to bring those together to work and scale up. So share solution, but also try to scale up solution. We also do something, well, I think that is fundamental to do. There is such a lack of knowledge in Europe around the role of urban food policy, but also the role of multi-level governance mechanisms. So this is what we are here today, and we're really happy to work in this. We will also launch a peer learning program for cities or policy labs. Basically, what we're going to do, we are going to bring together entities that have developed an innovative solution at local level, for example, on public canteen, reduction of food waste in public canteens, And we're going to ask them to host the visit of 2 additional public entities that are interested to learn from their experience. Colleagues from university, we have quite a number of research centers involved with us. We'll also work on a multi-actor and public engagement toolkit. Well, to work on food system, we all know that we have to involve all different actors, all different levels of society, also those among citizens that are not interested in food systems, so not only those that are more interested in joint policy work. So this toolkit should be ready relatively soon, actually. And we will be using it to develop food dialogues in 7 European countries. So we will be working in Spain, Italy, Hungary, Poland, and 3 more countries to decide. And what we want to do here is really, again, bring together different representatives from society, from industry, from farmers, from civil society organization, and also representative of the different level of governance. The city of Milan will be organizing those dialogues in Italy, for example, and the ambition is really to advance on national food policies so that all different levels of governance are engaged. Similarly, we will try to do the same at European level. Some of you may know that the European Union is currently discussing a European legislation related to food system. So all this lesson learned, and especially all this knowledge that we will develop also with this assessment to urban food policy will be brought at a European level. And we will also develop policy brief to feed into this upcoming legislation. So really to bring evidence on what the role of cities is around food system transformation and food policy, but also what they might be lacking in terms of cooperation with different level of governance. So this was really Clever Food in a nutshell, try to bring it as much as possible interesting for cities, for local authorities. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So that next slide is just my last one, just with my contact details, or feel free to add questions in the chat here today. That's it from my side.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will go on the details of the survey, which is part of the project in WP2, which is focused in governance and policy implementation. The survey aims at assessing the food policy development and the urban food policy development across Europe, and mainly focus on 2 main objectives. The first is to understand whether and to what extent cities are involved in food policy, and whether and to what extent cities are involved in multi-level food policy making. The objectives, specific objectives of the survey are 5. The first is understanding the commitment of municipalities to urban food policy. The second is to understand how the food policy are implemented at local level. The third objective is to understand if there are some attempts to develop in integration among sectorial policies. The fourth is to understand if local communities and stakeholders are involved in both developing the urban food policies, food policies, and in implementing the food policies. And as I mentioned before, the 5th specific objective of the service is understand whether and to what extent cities are involved in a multi-level governance framework on food. So the first objective, as I mentioned, is to understand the commitment of the cities in urban food policies. And we have framed this idea of commitment into 5 different strands. The first is what we call the political commitment. What we would like to understand is if the governments, the local governments, is involved in food policy. The first is very light, let's say, political commitment is what we called the express commitments, and refer just to government leaders making public statements about the need of urban food system transformation and stressing the will to develop urban food policy. The second level is a more intense commitment, and we talk about formal commitment when in a local government there is a presence of explicit political responsibility of a mayor or a vice mayor or other members of the local government. The second level of commitment is what we call institutional commitment, is when the cities has a food policy, a food plan, or a food strategy document that is institutionalized by formal public deliberation, resolution, or other legal instruments. So is to see if the, let's say, the political commitment is embedded at institutional level. The third, and is very important, is to combine the political with the administrative dimension. So what would you like to understand with the survey? If there is a presence of a specific administrative unit or office in charge of the food policy, or at least if there are any officers that are involved somehow in food policy making. In this case, we ask, for instance, if is a full-time or part-time officer that is somehow involved in the food policy making. The fourth level is about the budgetary commitment and refers if to understand if there are specific budgetary resources that are allocated to the food policy. And finally, if is the monitoring system is to understand if at local level it has been built a system of monitoring which is based on measurable indicators to analyze the impact of the food policy. So that is the general framework to understand in 50 cities in 29 countries what is the commitment of the cities to urban food policy. The second dimension is to understand how the cities are involved in food policy making, and we have identified 5 different, let's say, space of action of the cities. Here, when we talk about food policy implementation, we refer to any action, initiative of projects that the city is developing on these issues. The first is sustainable and healthy diets, and refers to school meal, food education, communication. So is the, let's say, the demand side, and refers to sustainable food consumption. The second dimension refers to access to food and social inclusion. So is to understand if the cities are developing projects about food aid, soup kitchen, any public initiatives aiming at providing food to people in needs. The third is about food waste. Once again, the idea is to understand if there are any, let's say, action, initiative, projects at local level or at international level about educational program on food waste, food surplus donation, food sharing, any really initiative aiming at reducing the food waste. The fourth dimension is the distribution side and refers to the markets and short supply chain. So here the idea is to understand if the cities are supporting especially short food supply chain. We refers to local market, farmer markets, community support agriculture, and initiatives that aims at shortening the supply chain, and also if cities are involved in directly in the management of wholesale markets. Finally, the fifth is about food production, and here we refers to urban agriculture, peri-urban agriculture, or vertical farming. Obviously, here we have identified 5 broad, let's say, dimension, but it's possible that in your cities you have other areas of intervention of the food policy, so you can refer also to other areas of intervention. The second dimension in understanding how the cities are implementing the food policy is to understand if these initiatives are integrated. The idea of a food policy or a food strategy is to shift away from a sectorial approach to a broader intersector, cross-sector integrated frame aiming at combining different areas of intervention as we consider the food system from production to consumption. The food policy aims at developing policies that combine different intervention in the different dimension of the food system. So here, for instance, we would like to understand if at local level, different departments of the cities or different or projects combine together different sector. For instance, sector of if we look at, for instance, redistribution of the food surplus, we have, I don't know, probably the Department of Social Affairs, because food surplus here is redistributed to people in needs, but also the Department of Environment, because it's about also food waste. So the idea is really to understand to what extent cities are involved in this kind of integrated project. The fourth dimension, as I mentioned before, is understanding to what extent civil society and stakeholders are involved in the food, let's say, food governance at local level. So the first is to understand if at local level, your city, you can find in your city a food policy council, or even if it's not named as food policy council, we refer to any kind of arrangements, informal also, not only formal arrangements, but informal organization where different members of the communities and the stakeholders come together and they interact with with the people and with the local governments supporting food policy making at urban level. And the second dimension we would like to explore is to understand to what extent the community is involved, not just in, let's say, writing the food policy, but also to to what extent the civil society organization are involved in implementing the food policy. The example of the city of Milan, for instance, in supporting people in needs, the municipality of Milan relies on the support of not-for-profit organization and the civil societies, and also the private sector. So here the idea is looking deep to how really the cities is able to involve the local community in food policy making. And the fifth dimension is to explore the multi-level governance of the food system. The cities have been pioneers in developing the food strategies, or we can call food strategies for food policy or food plan. This idea of integrated documents that combine different sectorial policies in a coherent frame. So what we would like to understand, if you can find this kind of integrated approach to food policies also at higher level, institutional level. So it can be metropolitan level, regional level, or national level. And if in your country you can find these different policies, to what extent cities are involved in implementing these policies at higher level. For instance, in Italy, we do not have any regional food policy. We do not have any national policy. So what we like to understand is if there are any relationship among the cities and the higher level, institutional level, on food in general. And in this case, we refer to the 6 areas we mentioned before. So the idea here is to understand if there are any relationship among the cities and the region on, for instance, food production. In Italy, regions are in charge of agricultural production. So what we would like to understand, for instance, from Italian cities, if they have any relationship with the regional level on food production, or informal relationship between the cities and the regions. That is almost everything about the let's say the frame, the conceptual frame we have developed to structure the survey. And obviously, if you have any further question or request to support to fill out the survey, we are here to support you. Now we can open the floor to question, and if also, I mean, in the future you need any support, you can send us an email to this email address, and we will be more than happy to support you on filling out the survey.